This has been fantastic just to draw out some of the key themes, and in particular that sensitivity to community and how communities and different groups within communities think and understand their place. And that's to some extent what I wanted to reflect on just very briefly in terms of the implications of this, because it is about how we understand the spaces in this area, how we understand not just what they could be used for, but how we develop and produce useful things on those sites that respond to communities and their assets. I was reminded of this. This was from the hotel next door that wrote to the council and weren't ashamed to have it publicly displayed that they wanted to see the area of the four-star hotel securitized from the markets, and they literally said that they did not want to see a four-star hotel being compromised by a housing estate. And it's where we are now with the city, and it's where we are with how different groups think they own places that are genuinely public realm or which they had nothing to do with their creation, and can quite openly and aggressively exclude others. And the site in particular is one that, you know, the gasworks is one that the community here got work out of, got polluted from, was a neighbour in a lot of ways in terms of its diseconomies and benefits. But you can see how over time they've been shifted out of those spaces, and they're not for them. And when you look at the gasworks site, when you look at what's happening in Titanic Quarter, when you look at the expansion in the Central Business District and Titanic Quarter, you can see these sorts of communities getting further and further marginalised. And the beauty of this process is it tries to resist those, but in a very authoritative and well methodologically grounded way. The stuff in children I looked at, we'd been involved loosely with a piece of work in the area, and it's not like this. It's children as activists with the Children's Neighbourhood Scotland and the University of Glasgow about how children move from being passive receptors of information or planners who think all they want is playgrounds, into understanding how they can actively produce their own space in quite mature and authoritative and sophisticated ways, but are actually very literate, well-judged and creative makers of their own space. And that's one of the beauties of something like this, especially the issue about how, like the gasworks and the Central Business District and Titanic Quarter, many of these spaces are being taken away from them by cars. And the little historic mapping and that sort of social history about how many spaces within the area were of value to children have been erased or removed altogether, and they're pushed onto these marginal, often quite dangerous spaces where they compete with commuter car traffic, where they have to deal with pollution and, you know, the congestion that we see in one of the most congested routes in the city. And I think that's been well captured. We've seen this particularly in the schemes around where the community have tried to claim the space here, and the Sunshine Not skyscrapers actively involved children who decided themselves, like, this is not what we want in our area, and are fairly articulate at evaluating what is wrong with their area, what is right with their area, and what is needed. And I think, and I'm not saying that this is a template or that this is a roadmap that they need to follow, but the creativity and energy in these ideas provide, I think, particularly children, but also organisations on the ground and statutory agencies, probably a check-in about, you know, how we think about these places and how we think about their management. Again, the one that we were interested in was, and have been doing some work with MDA on, is this building. Now, this is the Suffolk Street School. It was a space and a facility that the community really understood and used. It was a school for 100 years. It was a community asset for a short period after that. They got value from it. It was an emotional heart of the area, and it was something that the community saw as not just materially beneficial, but also socially important to their sense of identity and something of a central place in a community which, as several of the analysis point out, often lacks spatial coherence, a heart, any of that sort of things that you would associate with viable neighbourhoods. And it went for apartments, big surprise, and offices. And in a sense, that is a use. The City Council refused planning permission for it. In fact, the councillors in the session refused it unanimously and raised concerns about not just the type and quality of design, but also who these places are for and whether this is the best use both for the city centre and for communities. And in a sense, the mobilisation of children, young people and communities to say, in response to things that we're now getting from the Radisson, that actually these are assets and these are spaces that we can all use, and there isn't one or the other, but it is a genuine collective. One of the things I'll leave you with is a bit of work that we've been doing with MDA is about trying to understand the value of these places in a slightly different way. So we've got this office and this apartment. All of the money that is created by that is hoovered out by one developer. All of the money that is going into that in terms of the labour market, salaries and spend is not being spent in this area. Things like a heritage centre that speaks to the needs of the local community, provides employment, it provides assets for tourism, it can connect, and in fairness to the City Council are doing some really important work in trying to build up community tourism just as a voice, but also network it to other assets and tourist infrastructure in the area. The tourist economy here is phenomenal and is projected to grow. Most of that value is bypassing communities like this. This tries to trap that wealth in the area, provide opportunities, assets and experiences for the community, both to articulate their voice, but to also get some benefit from it. And we were estimating that every pound that is generated by the community version of the project will create something like £2.45 in the local area. It'll create things like direct income and spend. It'll add to the tourism infrastructure of the area. It'll create local multiplier effects because it is local people who will be employed and local people who would spend. And they will spend locally, and all the evidence shows that the multiplier effects from these types of projects are a hell of a lot different than if we had apartments and offices. And in a sense, that's the point about what type of uses that we want to see in these areas. How are these spaces claimed and understood and articulated? And I think this is a remarkably valuable set of analysis, of detailed drawings, and often when we see it synthesised, and we're all as planners very jealous of the way in which particularly depictions of space can be rendered like this, but it is a really powerful compendium setting out an alternative, not just use of this site or that site, but how we think about and plan the city. And so congratulations to all of you for that. Okay.